morning chị.
Hello
Hello
morning.
chị. Dạ. Có một chị nữa gì cùng chị đúng không ạ? Đấy là
Hôm
chị.
nay có nhõn chị thôi.
À có mỗi chị thôi à?
Ừ.
Ok, thế thì tuyệt vời quá. Chị nói vào bụng này giúp em.
Tuyệt vời quá.
Đỡ phải để hạt điều ạ.
Ok,
Ok,
ok.
chị không xài máy này à? Đây là cái máy đã setup sẵn cho chị để vào Zoom rồi này. Đấy thì chị có thể
Ai điều chỉnh Zoom?
điều chỉnh Zoom thì giống như mọi khi chị chỉ cần đổi
Chị
nói
điều
tiếng
chỉnh
Anh,
cái gì?
chị nói tiếng Anh thì chị ở tiếng Anh, chị nói tiếng Việt thì
Thế
ở
em
tiếng
mới
Việt
phải
thôi.
mở ra cho chị chứ.
Đấy thì chị vào Zoom
Tại
em
vì
rồi.
được.
Đấy.
Ừ.
Đấy chị vào rồi. Đấy Zoom này. Đấy. Đấy
À đây rồi.
là
Ơ
interpreter
nhưng
rồi.
mà đâu? Interpreter đâu?
Đây là đang là interpreter rồi đấy.
Đâu? Đâu? Mà này phải bàn interpreter đâu? À đây.
Đấy.
Ra
Đấy.
rồi mắt.
Đấy cái chị em bàn này chị lý một sang bên này đúng không cho nó tiện. Đấy bỏ cái này ra chị. Đấy, chuẩn luôn. Chị có cần cái này không? Đấy chị nếu mà đeo cái này thì chị phải cắm vào cái kia.
Chị dùng tay em, dùng tay em cho nó êm ái chứ.
Ok chị.
3 tiếng mà nhét cái lỗ
Vâng
này
ạ.
thì chết à.
Đây là cái để chị nghe hội trường này đúng không? Ok.
Thank you em.
Vâng ạ, cảm ơn chị.
Sao ra thế? Thôi thế. Đây đúng không?
Vâng ạ, đúng rồi chị ạ. Một mình chiến đấu.
Mình chiến đấu.
Mọi khi là phải có một chị nữa giúp các chị cơ mà.
Đúng rồi, nhưng hôm nay bọn chị bị trùng.
À trùng.
Nên bọn chị bị trùng.
Vâng ạ.
Phải chia ra.
Vâng ạ, lại cũng
Đây
có một
chị kia đang ngồi rình ở bên này.
À đây là chị. Ok chị.
Ok.
Đúng không chị nhỉ? Có một nắp project này đúng đây là màn hình dịch rồi đúng không? Vâng ạ, thì chị nói tiếng Việt, chị tiếng Việt, chị nói tiếng Anh, chị nói tiếng Anh thôi.
Chủ yếu tiếng Anh đúng không?
Chủ yếu tiếng Anh thôi. Đoạn đầu em nghĩ đoạn đầu thì chị phải đào một tí thôi, đằng sau là cứ tiếng Anh xả suộc thôi.
Rồi.
Em cảm ơn chị.
Thank you em.
Dạ, thank you chị. Thank you. Em cứ để thêm cái nước này đây nhé.
Ôi chị cảm ơn em nhiều.
Dạ. Chị lấy thêm cà phê không để cho?
Thôi một phát thứ không tí ở say
chết. Đủ rồi. Đủ rồi. Chị đếm thử để tên tiếng Anh chị đừng nói test cho em mấy câu nào trên tên tiếng Anh này. Chị nói bla bla gì
nó vào ở đâu? Đây là kênh tiếng Anh. Đây kênh tiếng Anh xong nó kêu gì nhỉ?
Ok chị, em
kênh tiếng Việt nhá, kênh tiếng Việt nhá.
Đây
nó vọng. Kênh tiếng Việt này, 1 2 3 4 5 6. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10.
Vâng chị ạ, thank you chị ạ.
Good morning, David. This is Lee. Can you hear me? Yeah. How are you? Yeah. Thanks. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the workshop on good practices in local budget transparency and policy implications. And our event will start in a few minutes. Please be seated. Make sure you're comfortable so that we can start the discussion very soon. Một hai ba bốn năm sáu bảy tám chín 10. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10.
Cái gì? Nó bị ra loa. Chị ơi, em cho chị một chút ạ. Nếu mà được chị nói lớn hơn cho em một chút nhé.
Chị nghĩ là bọn em điều chỉnh ấy thôi, chứ chị mà nói to quá
Chị,
thì
ba
nó
tiếng vào
chị ngồi 3 tiếng nó hơi bị ấy.
Giờ ok chị.
Nhá.
Vâng, ok chị.
Em nghe các tai nghe bên ngoài cho chị xem được chưa? Bây giờ là nói sát như thế này chị nghĩ là ổn rồi, tại vì là cái quan trọng là nó cái mic nó bắt ấy. Mic nó bắt và nó kích âm lên thôi. Nói như thế này là âm lượng như thế này là to quá rồi đấy.
Dạ vâng, em cảm ơn chị. Ok
chị cảm ơn.
Dạ vâng ạ.
Được chưa? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On the 10th of November 2022, the National Assembly enacted the law on grassroots democracy implementation, a very important step from the ordinance on grassroots commune democracy implementation. And besides to provide provisions on the budget transparency requirements, the law on grassroots democracy implementation 2022 also further enforced the motto of people know, people discuss, people implement, people verify, and people benefit. However, according to the results of PAPI 2022, a sheer percentage of the respondents said that they were aware of and been informed of the commune budgets, and also a very low percentage of the respondents said that they trusted the information that they received. And also, in order to assess the current situation and propose the solutions in order to improve the effectiveness of local budget transparency, BTOP, with the support of the UNDP, implemented a research on assessing good practices in local budget transparency, the results of which will be shared with all of you in the discussion today. And to start our program, on behalf of the organizers, I'd like to welcome all participants to this thematic discussion on good practices in local budget transparency and policy implications. And attending our program today, I would like to introduce to you Mr. Nguyễn Văn Linh, Vice Chair of the Budget Management Division of Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, Department of Finance, who is attending the event online, Mr. Vũ Sĩ Cường, the public finance expert from the Academy of Finance, Associate Professor Dr. Nguyễn Đức Thành, Director of VESS, Mr. Nguyễn Quang Thương, Executive Director, Center for Development and Integration, Master Đỗ Thanh Huyền, a policy analyst, UNDP Vietnam. So we are very pleased to welcome the representatives from policy-making bodies and representatives from research institutions and the relevant organizations who are joining the event online and on-site. Today we'll be focusing our discussion on the two main topics. The first one will be the results from good practices in local budget transparency and policy implications. And the second part will be a panel discussion on enhancing the efficiency of state budget transparency. So I encourage you that if you have any questions during the session, please leave your questions in the chat box, or you can raise your questions directly to the speakers in the room. And to start our discussion, I would like to invite Associate Professor Dr. Nguyễn Đức Thành, Director of Vietnam Center for Economics and Strategic Studies, VESS, with the opening remarks. Mr. Thành, please. Thank you, Mr. Long. Thank you, the organizers. Thanks the colleagues from UNDP for hosting this event. I'm very honored to be here today to speak to you and to open this thematic discussion as a representative of the research team. So we conducted this study on good practices in local budget transparency and policy implications. So to start our program, I just want first to talk about the importance of the work that we are doing. As Mr. Long mentioned in the opening remarks, we know that the administrative reforms in Vietnam have been implemented with great efforts from both central and local governments level, and also with the support from the entire population. And a number of indices have been formed to measure the effectiveness and efficiency of administrative reforms. And PAPI among them is one of the most significant one. And this is even more important in a culture in which we will need to enhance significantly the communication between the public and the authorities. So PAPI, and we also have POBI to promote the practices of transparency and openness in public administrative reforms in Vietnam. So this also has also served as the support for us to change the behavioral practices at both central and local level towards a more efficient administration. So when we observe the major indices such as PAPI or PCI or POBI, when the research team conducted research and developed these indices, we at the same time have created huge data resources which are highly valuable. So our research team and BTAP, the Alliance on Budget Transparency, discussed with the UNDP team represented by Ms. Huyền here, and we have come to a selection of combining these indices and using the source data in order to delve deeper into seeing what is happening in public administration in Vietnam. So that is the initial idea, and one of the first steps that we went in implementing, realizing this idea, is to conduct the studies on the practices in local budget transparency. And it has been 8 months since we first sat down together discussing it with Mr. Thương here representing BTOP, Ms. Huyền, Ms. Thanh from UNDP, and myself. And now this is where we are, and I think that this is a significant first step. So we've been working together, connecting various sources of data, and using this data from PAPI study and others to have come to these observations. So this is a very first step. So we will continue to work regularly, continuously with each other on this journey. We have received a significant support from donors and sponsors, companies, researchers. So we would like to thank the DFAT from Australia and Irish Embassy who have been supporting us through UNDP. And we would also like to acknowledge the cooperation of our colleagues from universities, research institutions, BTOP, the Budget Transparency Alliance, who have been working with us on technical side. And last but not least, local authorities, local governments, where we conducted this research, not only those 2 provinces, but also other provinces where PAPI and POBI research has been conducted. So the provinces have been very supportive to us, and we are thankful for that. So as a result of these initial efforts, we've got the observations that we will share with you today. And I hope that we can build on these results for further research in the future. So once again, thank you, the UNDP team and POBI team. Thank you, Ms. Huyền, personally, for being highly dedicated and enthusiastic in supporting us in this research. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Associate Professor Dr. Nguyễn Đức Thành. And next, I would like to invite Ms. Đỗ Thanh Huyền, Public Policy Analyst on Governance and Participation Team, UNDP Vietnam. Thank you very much, Long. Dr. Nguyễn Đức Thành, Director of the Vietnam Center for Economic and Strategic Studies, distinguished panelists and participants from central and provincial state agencies, Mr. Nguyễn Quang Thương, Deputy Director, Executive Director of CDI, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen. And with the authorization of my leaders at the UNDP, I'm very honored to be here. On behalf of the United Nations Development Program in Vietnam to start today's thematic discussion. And as Dr. Thanh mentioned, this is a great opportunity for us, the theorists and practitioners, to be here together discussing the current practices in local budget transparency, and also the policy implications that we would hope to be able to convey to policymakers in Vietnam. As you may know, and we also heard from Mr. Hoàng Long's opening remarks, on the 10th of November 2022, the National Assembly endorsed the Law on Grassroots Democracy Implementation. And this marks a significant advancement from the previous Ordinance number 34 on the same topic, democracy implementation at the commune level. And the Law on Grassroots Democracy 2022 is expected to strengthen the enforcement of the people-centric principle of people know, people discuss, people do, people supervise, people verify, and most recently we have added a very important element, people benefit. So this is a significant advancement with the people benefit element in this context, because today we are talking about the state budget process, And the law reinforces the rights of citizens as outlined in significant legislations, including the Law on Access to Information 2016, the Law on State Budget 2015, and the Law on Public Investment 2019. With the 2007 Ordinance number 34 and the State Budget Law 2015 having been in place for quite a while, insights from PAPI's finding over the last 7 years have shown a significant disparity between what citizens have received in terms of their access to information about state budget plans and expenditure at the commune level and what commune governments said they have delivered. On average, from 16 to 22, only 36% of the interviewed citizens confirmed that their commune's budget and expenditure reports were posted at the Commune People's Committee's premises. Of this number, only 28% personally read these reports, and about 75% of those who read the reports said that they had trust in the posted information. So, which means that 25% did not trust the information that they received. And as Dr. Tang mentioned, the POBI Index, Provincial Open Budget Index 2021, further highlights a considerable gap between provincial performance in disclosing state budget information as stipulated in the 2015 State Budget Law. And less than half of 63 provinces fully disclosed the budget and expenditure information on their official web portals. Regarding citizens' participation in state budget governance, the 2021 POBI also found that most provinces tend to limit opportunities for citizens to participate in the state budget processes. And we believe that addressing gaps in state budget governance is essential because it helps protect citizens' right to information, discussion, oversight, verification at various government levels. Moreover, monitoring how provinces make public of state budget planning and expenditure helps ensure that local governments comply with laws and policies regarding state budget transparency and citizen participation in state budget processes. Yeah, so from UNDP side, we hope that this would be the real objective of the research, which will ultimately help the local governments to see how they have been doing and how they can improve. To support the implementation of the 2022 Law on Grassroots Democracy, UNDP Vietnam has collaborated with our colleagues from the Vietnam Center for Economic and Strategic Studies, VEST, and the Center for Development and Integration, CDI, to conduct today's action research. The study aims to enhance citizens' participation in and transparency of state budget planning and expenditure in Vietnam by looking into local practices in budget transparency and engaging citizens in state budget processes. And we are very glad to be joined by representatives from departments of finance from various provinces. So we'll have the angles from researchers on what has been done well and what has not been done well. So that would serve as a basis for us to make recommendations to enhance the efficiency of state budget governance, because this is a two-way express way. Anyway, we need to have the participation from both sides. And we will also hear more from the research team presenting the findings and recommendations from the action research. And myself, what has made me concerned are the differences in state budget transparency performance at the provincial and grassroots level. It seems that all effort to disclose state budget information have been concentrated at the provincial level, but not gone further to district and commune level, and even lower, the village level. In fact, when it comes to the district, commune, and village levels, disparity in budget transparency gets wider when comparing between the practices in the two provinces the research team visited. Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, for example, did a better job than Điện Biên peers in budget information disclosure at the commune level. We'll talk about that later. However, in both provinces, citizens' participation in the budget cycle remains limited. Ladies and gentlemen, as we gather here today for this thematic discussion, we will have the opportunity to delve deeper into the findings and recommendations that have been made. And it is a privilege for us to be joined by distinguished panelists from central and provincial state and non-state agencies. Their insights into practical challenges and potential solutions to enhance citizens' participation in budget processes will certainly enrich our discussion. And we look forward to receiving your valuable comments and insights during the discussion this morning. In closing, we would like to appreciate the significant financial contribution from the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and the Embassy of Ireland in Vietnam for this research through the Citizen-Powered Innovation Initiative and thematic research under the PAPI Research Program. We also thank the research team from VEST and CDI for their diligent work in this exercise. They've been working very hard in conducting the research, analyzing statistics and data, and delivering the field visits. And once again, I wish you all the best, and I wish the discussion a great success. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Đỗ Thanh Huyền. And now we come to a presentation on the results from the research, good practices in local budget transparency and policy implications implemented by the Budget Transparency, Accountability and Participation Coalition, BTAP, and Mr. Phạm Văn Long will be the presenter. Well, first of all, I'd like to extend my warmest welcome to all of you and thank you for sparing your time to attend this event this morning. Thank you for coming to the sharing of good practices in local budget transparency and policy implications discussion. And frankly speaking, the topic of this research, the contents of the report itself is a lengthy one. That's why I will only focus on the key elements of the research within about 30 minutes. And then I hope to open the floor for discussion. That will make our event more meaningful. So in my presentation, first I will give you a brief introduction of the research and then focusing on the main results, based on which to provide you with conclusions, policy recommendations, and suggestions for the next steps. So as we heard from our opening remarks by Mr. Thành and Ms. Huyền, the objective of the research is clear. And I will not repeat that. And from these research objectives, we adopted the following research methodology. We reviewed and updated all legal basis on budget publicity, accountability of state governance agencies for budget issues and citizen participation in the budget cycle. So we reviewed all laws, decrees, and circulars on this topic. Second, we examined the relationship between the indices, for example, the Provincial Open Budget Index, POBI, and the Provincial Governance and Public Administration Performance Index, PAPI, and the Provincial Competitiveness Index, PCI, so that we can choose or identify good practices to help us select provinces to pay field visits to, and from which we could make proper recommendations Allow me to go straight into the results of these reviews. First, as we have reviewed the legal basis on budget, publicity, accountability, and participation, we started with laws and then decrees and then circulars. We reviewed carefully all these legislations bodies. However, omissions are possible, so you can help us add the necessary pieces of legislations into this. So we've got quite a significant regulatory framework on budget publicity, state budget publicity, from the laws on state budget to law on access to information, to the decree guiding implementations of the law and the proper circulars. However, there are gaps in the legal framework on budget transparency and citizen participation. Regarding budget transparency, we could identify the gaps in terms of the timing of budget document publicity, such as draft estimates and annual budget implementation reports, and the regulations regarding these remain unclear and difficult to determine. For example, the timing of the draft budget estimates is a very important time because it plays a decisive role in issuing the annual budget plan of a province and of the nation, of the city. So, according to current regulations in the State Budget Law 2015 and Circular 343 2017 of the MOF, the timing for disclosing the draft estimates is within 5 working days from the date that the documents are sent to the delegates of People's Councils at all levels. So this is a very important time, right? So 5 days, it's extremely difficult for the public to have access to this information, to read the information, and to provide their comments. Secondly, the timing for disclosure. 5 days from the date of sending these documents to the People's Council's members, and we don't know when the documents are sent. So it makes it really impractical because it cannot identify the specific timing of sending out these documents. While the draft estimates play a very important role in finalizing the budget plan, and also the annual final budget implementation reports are also a very important documents. So the state budget law also requires disclosure on the portals of the provincial governments. However, there is no regulation requesting for the disclosure of the commune budgets. So there are more than 11,000 communes, and of course posting this information requires significant resources, but that does not mean that we cannot do it, because all these documents from the local levels, from the grassroots levels, are all sent to the higher level, like from commune to district, from district to province. So it is possible. However, the regulations are not there. So it reduces the access to information for the public, because when we request that this information is made public at the premises of the Commune's People's Committee, the decree only requires the disclosure within 30 days. So after 30 days have elapsed, there are no further requirements for the documents to be there publicly. And later on we'll show you some images to prove to you that such a regulation really limits the access to information by the public. At the provincial level, provincial authorities have to prepare various budget documents based on different templates stipulated in various circulars, decrees, and regulations. For example, Decree 31 or Circular 343 issued in 2017, or other templates under the budget transparency system issued by the Ministry of Finance, and also another templates to be used and sent to the provincial statistical office. So for the same information, 4 different types of templates are being used. Not just for research. When we conducted POBI research, we realized, and we also heard from provincial officers complaining about this because it takes a lot of time and efforts for them to prepare all these templates, all these documents in different templates with the same information. And we understand that the provincial budget management office comprising of like 7-8 people, but only one officer is responsible for this. And not only the budget transparency thing, but many other aspects are not regulated or are not provided for in the laws. And also there are no sanctions or measures in place for delayed publicity or non-publicity of budget documents at all levels. Another example for you to see more clearly this picture. When I go out shopping and I present the 500 dong notes, the merchants refused to accept. So while the law forbids refusal of accepting these notes, but there are no sanctions. Very simple example for you to see that many sanctions are not yet in place for us to ensure that laws and regulations are enforced. Secondly, regarding citizens' participation, at the law and sub-law document levels, there are no specific regulations regarding direct citizens' participation in state budget management activities, but primarily indirect participation through representative mechanisms. So the Constitution provides for both direct and indirect participations of citizens in state budget management activities. And the state budget law provides for participation through representative mechanisms. However, there are not specific regulations on implementation. So in our experience and from our observations, you may see that laws and decrees and circulars are one thing, but implementation is another matter. And when it comes to correlation between PAPI, PCI, and POBI indices for 2018-2021 period, we first want to identify the correlation, and then this helps us in choosing the pair of provinces to pay study visits. So in this section, the research team attempted to explore any correlations between these indices. So we have to say that while we cannot identify correlation directly between the key indices, but there are correlations between the dimensions or the parts or various indices under the PAPI. And each measurement here employs a different methodology. Therefore, comparisons are purely relative in nature. And these are some of the findings for you to see the positive correlation of the dimensions indices of PAPI and PCI on budget transparency. For example, you look at PAPI and POBI. And what you want to note here is that the number of provinces, in the group of provinces that we looked at. So we have this third group that we need to pay attention to when we look at their scores, because this group 3 have the score below the average level of PAPI budget transparency, but above the average level of POBI. What does that mean? In 2021, there are 21 provinces that had the budget transparency score higher than average under POBI index. However, for the same 21 provinces, the budget transparency score at the commune level is below the average level of PAPI. So the PAPI's methodology is direct interviews, while the POBI methodology is online interviews, online research. So this is the list of provinces that are in this group for 3 or 4 consecutive years. So we paid our visits to Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu and Điện Biên. Why did we choose these 2 provinces? It is because these are 2 provinces having the provincial budget transparency indices improving consecutively over the period of 5 years, so from 2018 to 2021. Vũng Tàu, in particular, had POBI scores and PAPI budget transparency component scores higher than the average, while Điện Biên had POBI scores and PCI budget transparency component scores higher than average. And from our field visits, we could also identify the disparities that we'll discuss later with you. And this is the maps on the correlations. So we put the provinces according to these correlations. So for example, PAPI BT high, POBI low, or PAPI budget transparency high, POBI high. And then the third group, the yellow group here, are those with low PAPI budget transparency but high POBI, which suggests to us that there are issues here that we need to observe. And we also need to pay attention to this when conducting POBI as well as PAPI. And here is PCI transparency component and POBI and the correlation between them. So I have to say that when it comes to transparency component scores under PCI, there are questions under PCI asking businesses, of course, asking if when they read the public budget information, does it help them in their business implementation? But in 2021, these questions on budget transparency was removed, was dropped. I don't know why, unfortunately. Perhaps it's because in many provinces, the budget information was not disclosed. That's why businesses did not have access to such information. So here we have the provinces above average level of PCI transparency and below average level of POBI. So businesses said, the number of businesses said that the budget transparency is higher. The score under PCI is above the average, but POBI below the average. Are also those worth more attention. So again, some maps to represent, to display these correlations. And results from the fieldwork are important part of our research. We looked at two provinces of Điện Biên and Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, and as I mentioned, Điện Biên and Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu are two of the provinces. I mean, there are other similar provinces in the group of having continuously improving the PAPI budget transparency score over the years. So in 2021, Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu had the absolute score of 100% of provincial budget disclosure requirements under the state budget law, which suggests significant efforts made by the local governments. So an overview of Điện Biên and Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu for you to see the discrepancies. Điện Biên is situated in the northwest region of Vietnam, sharing borders with Laos and China. And this is a disadvantaged province with difficult economic situation. And the majority of Điện Bien's budget was transferred from the central budget. And King people are the minority group in Điện Biên, because the majority of population in Điện Biên are Thai and Hmong people, more than 60%, and other ethnic groups. And then the Hmong people can speak Hmong language, of course, Thai and Thai languages. And so it's like almost everyone in Điện Biên would communicate in Thai language. So we purposely selected one province in the north and one province in the south to see the differences. So Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu is one of the 17 provinces with the budget surplus, meaning that they contribute significantly to the central state budget. And so we looked at all levels, from the provincial to district to commune and village level. So at the provincial level, we worked with the DOF, Department of Finance officers, and at the district level, we went to 2 districts, 3 communes, and 2 villages. And we worked with the leaders of the proper level authority, governments, and also representatives of citizens. So, from Điện Biên, annually, the PPC issues regulations on local budget management and administration. In the 2 most recent years of 2022 and 2023, they did so. They issued a decision as a regulation on local budget management and administration. And for the district level, in these decisions of the provincial government, the decisions clearly outline the requirements for all levels and sectors to provide guidance and ensure the full implementation of financial transparency regimes for budget levels. They also specify that finance and budget publicity must be carried out following the guidelines provided in circulars such as 343 or 61 or 90, etc. of the Ministry of Finance. And the PPC also stipulate that the provincial level must publicize budgets on the electronic portal of the PPC. And so at the provincial level, it is really good. And it is even better in Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, because they went a step further, requiring that the budget-related documents shall be published immediately after being approved by competent agencies and individuals. So they are really serious about this, and we hope that other provinces can follow this role model. And from the resolutions of the parties, committees of Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu and lower, the PPC, they issued guidelines or official letters pushing for budget transparency. For example, the Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu People's Committee issued Directive 05 in 2021 regarding the improvements of the PCI for the period of 5 years, asking or requiring that the budget-related documents should be published immediately. However, as I mentioned, unfortunately, PCI 2022 already removed this requirement. As a result of provincial open budget for the period 2018-2021, we did have the results for 2022, but we do not yet make it public. So it is expected that in September, we can disclose the results for 2022 provincial open budget. So this is the POBI results for Điện Biên and Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, which both have improved. And for Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, it is 100 over 100 and ranked the first, the top. When it comes down to district level, the general situation is that there are really very good directions from the provincial government. And when we search the websites of provincial and district people's committees, we see that the decisions and resolutions are posted on their portals. However, implementations varies between Điện Biên and Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, starting from the district level. So this is Điện Biên. We reviewed 5 years from 2018 to 2022 at the district level. And the red dots here are non-disclosure, and the blue dots are disclosure, timely disclosure. So we see that these are the documents that are required to be disclosed under the state budget law. So for Điện Biên, we see that while there are sufficient and adequate guidelines and documents from the district sent to this, from the provincial sent to the district level, but when it goes down to the district level, we see that only in Điện Biên, for example, the official websites of Điện Biên Phủ City and Điện Biên Đông District have a budget transparency section on their official websites. But then we see that the blue dots here are seen mostly in 21 and 22, only in these 2 years. And the results are better in Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu. So we went to Long Điền and Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu city, Bà Rịa city, and we see more blue dots here. When we went down further to the commune level, as mentioned by Ms. Huyen in the opening remarks, we could see that Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu is doing better at the commune level compared to Điện Biên. And in Điện Biên, there are communes that when we went there, the documents are very new, as if they just came out from the printer. So there was one commune, when we went there, the dates of issuing or posting these communes, these documents, was the date that we went to that commune. It's interesting, right? So in Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, the commune governments are doing better in many communes, and not only at the commune level. We went to Long Hải town and Phước Hưng ward. They have a very interesting model of Saturday of listening to the people, Thursday not waiting, digital signature of major documents. So these are very interesting initiatives in Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, which help people to engage and help closing the gaps between the people, the citizens, and the governments. And I want to talk about Saturday of listening to the people model, because when we went to Long Hai, our observation is that this model has been very useful in bridging the gap between citizens and the government. So in Long Hai, this practice has been in place since 2022. And as of now, it has been rolled out in all communes. And so when Saturdays of listening to the people events are hosted, it is on Saturday when the officers are on weekend. So they organize these dialogues and meetings with people, addressing the concerns of the local residents. And you can go to Long Hai Town's Facebook to page. They update regularly this model and the results of this model. So even though the date when we went there was not Saturday, so they did not organize a dialogue, but we visited their fan page of Long Hai Town, and they've been doing it very efficiently. And hundreds of comments have been made, including 125 comments on budget. So we could see that people really wanted to engage. The reasons for organization of these opportunities came from the chairman of the People's Committee of Long Hai Town. He said that citizens are hesitant to interact and meet with officials, and they feel anxious and inconvenient when visiting government offices. So this is well understood by the People's Committee's chairman. So this is need to be well understood by the management, by the leadership. So the commune's chairman is the local man. So he understands very well the needs and the characteristics of the people. That's why he supports actively the organization of this model. So that's why they decided to organize the Saturdays listening to the people to create a comfortable, friendly, and approachable space for citizens to easily express their opinions and suggestions to local leaders and authorities. These are some images of budget publicity at the headquarters of commune people's committees in Điện Biên province. Very new. Yeah, newly printed, fresh out from printers. You see, 27th of June 2023. That was the date we paid the on-site visit to Điện Biên. And this is Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, not as new, right? And then when we scratched the surface, there was dust on it. So it's been there. It had been there for quite a while. And the one-stop shop officer led us to see this board where the budget information is posted. And in certain communes, they also printed this information on A3 papers, not A4, but A3. At hamlets or village level, there is a shrinking in Điện Biên, right? Because usually the commune level budget documents are not publicized or not posted at the commune people's committees or practices, but they did. So if they do so on a daily basis, it is good. But if it is just a measure to respond to defend themselves before the visits of outsiders, then it is not that good, right? Because we realized that even though the documents are posted at the premises of the commune's premises, these seem still quite new. And the information about revenues and expenditure items, including community-driven initiatives to improve local cultural facilities, is publicly displayed at the cultural center. However, the publicity regarding revenues and expenditure of non-budget funds still have several limitations. So this is Điện Biên at the commune level. So they are not requested, but they are there. So we hope that this is a real practice, not just a formality, ahead of the visits of the research team. And this is Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, very real, genuine picture. And when it comes to citizens' participation in the budget cycle, for Điện Biên, there is one limitation. In terms of citizens' participation, when we see and when we met citizens, they really were hesitant about participation. And only like heads of villages, etc., participated. In Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, citizens participate in the budget cycle through the representative mechanisms. As conclusions, policy recommendations and suggestions for the next steps, I'll be very brief. First of all, regarding the legal basis, why there is a good regulatory framework for budget publicity accountability, there are certain limitations. For example, a regulation regarding the online publicity of commune-level budget documents and non-budget funds, or the minimum period for the publicity, which currently limits the access to information. It may be the reason why the documents are very new when we came there. Yeah, because it could be the time when the deadline was expired already. So this needs to be improved. And also, the process of preparing and publicizing budget documents is carried out using multiple templates under different regulations, leading to time and resource inefficiencies, and there needs to be more consistency, and we need guidance from the Ministry of Finance. There is another issue was the lack of sanctions against non-performance. Regarding the correlation between PAPI, PCI, and POBI indices, while correlations have not been identified for the overall indices, there are positive correlations between PAPI and PCI and POBI. I mean the scores of the component indices. There are provinces with high POBI scores but low PAPI budget transparency and PCI transparency scores, and vice versa. And this shows that public posting on e-portals is not enough, and vice versa. So we need to require for disclosure both online and on-site to enable accessibility of different groups, particularly the disadvantaged one. On the practices of budget publicity in Điện Biên and Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, this is our preliminary conclusion. Actually, it is a hypothesis that needs to be tested. So when we compare between these two provinces, we see that Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu is relatively better in terms of practicing budget publicity at the provincial, district, and commune levels compared to Điện Biên. Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu is also the province where citizens contribute significantly to the budget, and people's demand for transparency is higher. On the contrary, in Điện Biên, where substantial portion of the budget comes from the higher level and citizens' contributions are lower, people demand on budget transparency is lower. So this is our hypothesis that needs to be further verified in the next stage of this research. And actually, indeed, citizens still face difficulties in searching for and accessing budget-related documents. They are unsure about whom to approach and hesitate to ask local officials about these matters. The publicity of information regarding the revenues and expenditures of non-budgetary funds are still limited. There are like 6 funds of these kinds, non-budgetary. However, they are very vague. Not only in Điện Biên and Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, even Bobi results so far suggest that the number of provinces disclosing these non-budgetary funds is very few because they are not required to do so and there are not templates to follow. With regard to legal framework, we understand that in 2025, the law on state budget is expected to be amended. So it is a very good opportunity to improve on the current limitations. So the amendment of regulations regarding the timing of publicizing budget documents should be carried out with a specific time frame defined to enhance accessibility and encourage contributions from the people. 5 days would not be enough for the people to have access to information, to understand, and to make comments. We also need to see addition of regulations on online publicity for commune-level budget documents and grassroots non-state funds, along with guidelines on the format of publicizing such non-state funds. In Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, there is a separate directory for the commune levels to publicize their budgets. So there is no reason why we cannot replicate this model. So 700 districts will be easier for 11,000 communes. And we also need to extend the time frame for publicizing commune-level budget documents instead of just a 30 days requirement. We also need to see a consistency in the regulations on budget publicity templates as guided by Decree 31 and Circular 343, as well as the online publicity system of the MOF. And these should be harmonized. So MOF systems is in accordance with Circular 343. However, some lines are missing. That's why it takes another effort for the implementers to prepare another templates and then to update on the system. Because actually there are several items considered as confidential and not to be disclosed. Actually, we can just use one template with the option of hiding certain fields or lines. And finally, there should be a mechanism to handle delays in publicity and non-publicity of budget documents, because currently there are not such sanctions. Also, with regard to the issue of budget publicity implementation, local governments must adhere to and accurately implement the publicity of budget documents in accordance with the regulations on the Law on State Budget 2015 and Decree and Circular 343. In Điện Biên, when we visited Điện Biên, many communes still do not have the grid electricity, let alone internet, right? So online publicity is only one possible format. But if it is unrealistic, then there needs to be other forms of publicity made available and practical for them. And language issue also, because all the documents publicized are in Vietnamese, so the ethnic minority people are at disadvantage. And also people with disability, visually impaired people, for example, are also at the disadvantage. So if we don't want to leave anyone behind, then we need to think about this, and maybe on an experimental basis first. And on Điện Bien's DOF's website, they have the audio support, digitization, by adding the audio feature. However, only the headings. Of course, the reports itself may be lengthy, but we need to find a way to be able to publicize the budget reports to enable pupils' accessibility at all levels, especially for the commune budget. For example, a flowchart or a map of the commune budget, for example, would be helpful. With regard to citizens' participation, we need to see specific guidelines to enable citizens to contribute their opinions on general state governance issues, and especially on state budget related matters, in accordance with the representative mechanism stipulated in the Constitution and relevant legal documents. The implementation and expansion of models and good practices related to budget publicity will be essential, and will need to start from citizens' need. So we should not replicate or generalize the models in a mechanical way just to smart up our scores. We have also suggested several points for next steps. Even though the legal provisions regarding budget information publicity are fairly comprehensive, the results, the performance, on the other hand, mostly is concentrated at the provincial level, with limitations down the line at the district and commune level. Therefore, it is necessary to extend the practice of budget publicity to lower levels of government and incorporate it into the assessment of ranking of provinces, particularly at the district level, possibly through random sampling. Because we have, there are 700 districts, so reviewing this practice within a short period of time would be impractical and unfeasible given resource limitations. Based on the comparison of the cases of Điện Biên and Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, we have put forward the following hypothesis. Local governments, in the districts or communes where citizens contribute significantly to the budget, the communes have a higher demand for publicity. And the higher the per capita income is, the better the transparency culture. Or regional factors can lead to the formation of the transparency culture. Of course, from only 2 provinces, we cannot make a conclusion. This is only a hypothesis that we will need to look further going forward based on more diverse range of real-world situations. So that's it from me. I think that I run several minutes over the time limits, and thank you for your understanding and listening. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Phạm Văn Long. To continue, we would like to open up for panel discussion. enhancing the efficiency of state budget transparency. And I'd like to introduce to you the panelists. Mr. Nguyễn Văn Linh, Vice Chair of the State Budget Management Division of Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu Department of Finance, who is attending online. Mr. Vũ Sĩ Cường, Public Finance Expert from Academy of Finance. Mr. Nguyễn Quang Thương, Executive Director of CDI. And I'd like to invite Ms. Đỗ Thanh Huyền, Policy Analyst, UNDP Vietnam, to moderate this session. Ms. Huyền, please. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Long, for a very comprehensive, detailed, and informative presentation. And we appreciate the contributions of the research team in reviewing the legal framework, and also the work done on identifying and understanding the budget transparency and publicity, and good practices in public transparency. Even though the scope of the conducted research was a bit small, I understand and agree with Mr. Long that we'll need to further this research beyond just two provinces of Điện Biên and Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu. So we understood that Điện Biên also improved their practice, even if it is a reactive movement, but it is acknowledged, and we hope that this practice will be maintained. So I think that Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu and Điện Biên are two very different provinces in terms of economic endowments and development level. So we appreciate that. So to open this panel discussion, I would encourage everyone to listen and then to contribute by exchanging our views, our opinions on the realities and on what can be improved in the future. So first of all, I'd like to ask several questions to Mr. Nguyễn Văn Linh from Department of Finance of Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu. Mr. Linh, can you share with us your view about the challenges that you have in implementing the requirements on budget transparency? What is your recommendations for improving budget transparency in your province? And what can you share with other provinces? So we hope to hear from you, Mr. Linh, from Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, Department of Finance. Yeah, can you hear me well? Thank you. Dr. Nguyễn Đức Thành, Director of VES, Dr. Cường from Academy of Finance, Mr. Thương from CDI, Ms. Huyền from UNTP. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, on behalf of Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu Department of Finance, I'd like to thank the Center for Development and Integration for assisting us in attending this event virtually. Actually, we are during a very busy period of finalizing our accounts and finalizing our financial and budgetary documents. That's why we have to be part of this event, but just online, and cannot be there in Hanoi with you. Responding to Ms. Huyền question about the actual implementation of budget publicity and transparency in our province and the challenges that we have faced, I'd like to share with you the actual situation in budget publicity and transparency in our province and some suggestions that I would like to share with you. Well, as you have heard from Mr. Long, in Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, we were fortunate to have the support from the Provincial People's Committee through the resolutions of the Provincial Parties Committee, fostering the improvements of PAPI, PCI, POBI, and we aim to be in the top 10 provinces. And we also aim at having 85% of satisfaction of citizens and level 3 in implementation of public administrative procedures. So we set out the targets to achieve, which are fairly ambitious. So functional departments of the province advised the leadership to identify and to set out these targets. And then the provincial governments issued resolutions for the period of 5 years, 21-25, in which the budget, publicity and transparency targets have been assigned to the Department of Finance. The People's Committee issued Directive number 05, guiding implementation to all levels of governments, and also charging the DOF with implementation and of the budget publicity assignments at the local levels. When it comes to implementation arrangements, we start from this annual resolution. And on annual basis, the People's Committee issued the annual working plans for all departments, including DOF. And at the DOF, we also assign specific tasks to respective divisions and even individuals. So we really took these tasks very seriously. We have the advantage of being supported by our leadership and the strong will from the leadership. Second, we have been able to make use of advanced technologies in publicizing the budget information from simple measures such as using Zalo groups, setting up the working groups providing the templates for budget disclosure in the soonest and most effective manners, because as Mr. Long mentioned, there are various templates and multiple documents are required for submission to the People's Council under different circulars. Therefore, we need to be supported by information technologies, which we could leverage fairly effectively. We also set up an electronic mailbox. Besides the DOF's website, we set up a mailbox and a support team to respond to comments or questions or queries from citizens and organizations whenever they have questions about budget information. So these questions or emails will be sent to the Department of Finance. So we provide so that we can provide responses timely to the inquirers. When it comes to supervision, oversight, and monitoring, under the state budget law, the fatherland front of the province is also playing their part. And in the meetings of the People's Councils and People's Committees, the requirements on publicity, on budget publicity and transparency have become even more increasingly demanding, charging the People's Committees and authorities with higher responsibilities and accountability. So, the citizens' participation, even though in the indirect representative mechanism, is effective. When budget estimates are being prepared or budget accounts are being finalized, the DOF would invite the Vietnam Fatherland Front's representatives and representatives from other committees of the People's Councils of the province, for example, the Economic and Budgetary Commission of the People's Councils, to participate and to provide comments to us. And also in their communications with their constituents, they have this information to respond to voters' questions about the province budgets. Responding to the questions why we have been able to improve our budget transparency score continuously, besides the strong will and determination of the provincial leadership, we've been supported strongly by various departments of the province, and we build on Circular 343 and the guidance on budget accounts, final accounting guidelines to improve our performance. Going forward, we'll continue to advise our People's Committee to do this even better and supporting our district and commune levels to perform better. After working with the research team conducted by the CDI, we also immediately provided support to the districts or communes where limitations were identified to support them. But basically, under the current regulations, the performance has been good. After conducting our checks and verifications, we also conducted training. And in 2023, we organized 2 short-term training in June on budget planning at all levels with a presenter, with a trainer from the Ministry of Finance. And so the training was about budget publicity, budget disclosure, and the second training is organized today, including budget publicity requirements under Circular 61, including provincial district budgeting levels. So we've got a trainer from Ho Chi Minh City University of Economics who will help with delivering the training. So these are the advantages that we have had and we could leverage on in performing our tasks. And we have made certain results. However, it is far from perfect because besides these advantages, there are also challenges for us. We have identified several challenges that we want to share with you. Firstly, the publicity criteria. So as I mentioned to you, in Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, we have been complying with the circulars, and we use it as a basis for rewards and discipline, and it has been good. However, there are gaps that we have identified. For example, there are new criteria, the reliability or the credibility of budget data or final accounts, final budget accounts data. So there are gaps in such new criteria. So we suggested to the team that the experts can discuss to make recommendations to the policymakers for considering and providing supplementary guidance on these new criteria to support us in implementation. Second, disclosure of the annual draft estimates. So this is just draft estimates, draft budget plan. And under the decision 1923 of the Prime Minister, Article 2 refers to state secrecy and the level of confidentiality, which specifies that the budget plan containing detailed information on the defense and security areas to be submitted to the People's Council, standing members of the People's Committee. So according to this regulation, actually the draft estimates are confidential documents because it contains defense and security information. That's why we suggested to the team to look into this matter, to provide or to make proper recommendations to the policymakers that if they require us to disclose draft budget estimates for people's participation, then the regulation must be amended. The next point is related to training. We hope that CDI, together with the Ministry of Finance, could advise the government in organizing more training for provinces. Then the provinces can do better for the ultimate goal, not for competition, not for contests, but ultimately to help provinces to have better and sounder foundations to improve the efficiency of budget transparency and prevention of corruption. You also asked me about our solutions to improve performance of public transparency at the local levels. Because as Ms. Huynh mentioned, citizens are still reluctant and hesitant to interact with officers whenever they may want to participate or we think about their participation in making comments in the budget processes. We suggest that there needs to be specific guidance on the areas of budget disclosure that would require the governments to disclose to reduce the level of hesitance of people when requesting for this information. So the requirements for pieces of information to be disclosed needs to be put very explicitly in regulations. So people can be more confident in requesting for disclosure of such information. So thank you very much for listening to my sharing. And thank you once again for allowing me to participate in this discussion and sharing with you our suggestions. I hope that will continue to support us in addressing our concerns and challenges and further improving our performance. Thank you, Mr. Nguyễn Văn Linh from Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu Department of Finance for your sharing. Very genuine comments and opinions about public budget publicity and transparency. From PAPI research, we also found that less than 3% of respondents have read this information, budget information, and also only 3/4 of the respondents, of the readers, trusted the information. So quite a long way to go. Mr. Tang from West, you visited the two provinces, Điện Biên and Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, and you went to communes. So which communes of the ones that you visited did you see using good practices in budget transparency? And what are the elements for the good performance? Did you have a look? Did you look at the list and the documents? And do you think that the documents are user or reader friendly? Because my own experience is that it is really hard for an average citizen to read these numbers and tables and understand it. So from your actual experience, would you make any suggestions on simplifying the disclosed information? One more thing. In the recommendations, we see one on transparency culture. And that is a very interesting suggestion. So can you further elaborate this recommendation, and can it be translated into any specific action that you would advise? Thank you, Ms. Huyền. Thank you, Mr. Lin, for your comments, your opinions shared, and your questions asked. Firstly, regarding the field visits that we conducted, at this moment, this research, I have to make it clear, it is only still very preliminary, because we had to have this research to connect data across various research and indices, PAPI, BOBI, PCI. So we want to connect all the dots to try to see any behavioral elements under all this data of the provinces in implementing their public administrative reforms and in implementing their budgetary disclosure requirements. So this is a very important theoretical part, conceptual part first. And then this year, we could only go to 2 provinces. And then Mr. Long talked about those provinces in Điện Biên and Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, from which we draw certain observations and conclusions, and also made certain hypotheses that will need to be looked at much deeper and further going forward. I personally, being involved in various surveys, I want to share with you this. Mr. Ling was quite right in making his comments that having high scores is not the ultimate goal of governance. Having high scores here is only a demonstration of your possible good performance. So if the scores help you to perform better, then that is how it can be meaningful. From what we see, there seems to be a lack of autonomy or proactiveness by the local governments. Maybe there is an element of transparency culture that would reflect the interactions between citizens and governments, and the culture that desired culture is not there yet. The citizens still do not yet see what they can demand from governments and what role they can play in grassroots democracy and in participating in these processes. So the culture is not there yet, it's not clear yet. But what we can see are differences in different places. We see discrepancies, like even though their scores have improved over time, but we can see disparities in performance in Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu and versus Điện Biên. Of course, they are different. Demographic features are different. In Điện Biên, there are more ethnic minorities than king people. Geographical locations are different. Economic and social developments are different. In Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, we know that population density is high, level of education attainment is higher, and their contributions to the state budget is much higher when they are fully budgetary and financially autonomous. And so we see that there is an element of fiscal role here. So in the localities where they contribute fiscally significantly, then their requirements, their demand are also increasing because they have the surplus of budget and they contribute to their net supplier of the budget to the central budget. So they are also more demanding in terms of budget publicity. And it is different from the provinces where they receive net transfer from the central budget. When I say Thai people in Điện Biên province are more than other ethnic minorities, I do not mean that they are less demanding for democracy and transparency than other ethnic minority groups. I do not mean so, because, as citizens anywhere, they would have the same rights and demand. However, the difficulties here are the geographical features. That is not yet to mention the language barriers. So, the financial documents are highly technical, and practices globally and in other places, they have to, translate translate these budget and financial documents into a citizen's language, civil budgets, to make it closer to an average citizen. Or they can display it, demonstrate it in big panels to make it visually accessible and user-friendly, rather than providing a set of A4 papers thick of numbers and tables. And in Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, we can see that the transparency culture is higher. So, for example, they have major maps on communes or district spatial planning, big ones, big maps on the master plans of the administrative units. And I think that this is a highly civilized practice. If we can replicate this practice to budget documents, right? If we can demonstrate or display or visualize the budget information into big pictures, easy to read, easy to understand, people would just need to know major numbers on school, on major infrastructures that they could benefit locally. That may be enough. So I think that these can be next steps that we can undertake in order to improve this budget transparency. So I think what we can see here is that, yes, there is disparity across provinces in which transparency culture and democracy culture will need to improve. Of course, it has improved over time, but it will need to improve further going forward. And we look at the economic activities. The more complex economic activities become, the more governance, demands on governance. There are different challenges and difficulties in different provinces. We understand that in Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, economic activities are busy, that could pose limitations on the time available for the officers to serve, while in Điện Biên, even though economic activity is not as busy, but geographic and demographic difficulties and challenges are maybe the limitations. Then we need to find the right way to help improve the budget transparency practices in each of the provinces. And we have the general directions of budget transparency at the national level, and the practices will need to be localized. And research of this type help us expose these challenges. Political determination, political will of local governments is very important. And we do see that there are directions or decisions of provincial local governments referring to important indices by PBOB, PCI, being supported by different groups, and the provincial governments set out explicit targets on improving those indices and setting up the systems to share data and information and ranking. So I think that if provincial governments are well aware of this and setting out for themselves targets and promoting the efforts across their administrative units, then it will not just stop at the superficial formality work or actions, but essentially they can improve really the performance of their budget transparency and governance. And I think that we can learn from each other, the provinces can learn from one another and improve the interactions, and the good practices can be replicated, can be learned, and can be customized to specific situations of provinces. So UNDP and Oxfam supported us in developing POBI. And now we've got all the practices and criteria for good practices. So while in the first place, good practices were introduced just to respond to the external demand, but over time it has become a culture. And then, it will become inevitable. It's like wearing helmets, right? In the first place, it may be odd, it may be awkward for, or not so comfortable for drivers to wear helmets when driving their motorbike. But when it has become their practice, their natural practice, it has become their culture, then it would become a real good practice that they cannot afford to remove anymore. So that's when the culture is formed and enforced. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Tang. For a culture to be formulated, I think that there needs to be pressure, right? A pressure for competition, for example. And then it will become action. So indeed, it is not only disclosure on budget information, but also land information disclosure. I think that still formalities is an issue. So we want to turn this formal reaction into an actual, genuine need of the implementers. Only then do we have a really transparent and open governance towards which we are working. Allow me to turn to Mr. Nguyễn Quang Thương from Center for Development and Integration. After 5 years of POBI implementation, what are your observations and assessment of changes at the provincial level in promoting state budget transparency at the provincial level? And in your opinion, is it a good time for us to further strengthen public transparency and publicity at the district and commune level? And what are the challenges that you have identified, and how BTOP can participate in helping the policymakers in this area, because I understand there have been challenges in introducing POBI to provinces. Yeah, but once it has been established, it has become a really acknowledged measure. Yeah. So we wanted to measure something, and we create pressure on local governments for responding to these targets, and then forcing them to formulate these practices. Mr. Thương, please. Thank you, Ms. Huyền. Well, BTOP, with the support from Oxfam and through VEST and CDI, conducted POBI since 2017. 2017 was the first year, and it's been 6 years already. We have not published results for POBI 2022. And we have observed significant improvements at the local level. And as Mr. Long shared, both Điện Biên and Vũng Tàu have demonstrated ongoing improvements over the time. And I recall that right from the beginning, the level of interest from the provinces to POBI was very minimal. So when BTOP came to provinces introducing POBI to them, they were not interested. They were not aware. They asked, what is this indictment about? And then they've been familiarized themselves with this, and they've been paying more attention to POBI. They've been thinking about how to improve the index, and they've been interacting with us more regularly. So our work has become more busy. Since 2017, we see that the average POBI score was about 30, and after 6 years, the average score is now around 70. So we see the improving trend, but after a certain improving period, now it tends to moderate. And in the initial years, it has improved significantly. And we just asked for the most basic fundamental criteria. From the fourth year onward, we introduced good international practices in budget transparency, credibility in the final budget accounts, and citizens' contributions, etc. So these are new criteria that we've introduced into POBI, not only the criteria of responding to or complying with Vietnam's laws and regulations, but also international good practices. That is when we see that the improving pace has been moderating or slower. There are a number of challenges that BTOP have not yet been able to resolve. That is district level, because of the limited resources for BTOP. Because for POBI, we received the support from Oxfam, and we could cover 63 provinces only. But you know that when it goes down to district level, the sample is much more, with more than 700 districts. And the methodology would also be a challenge one. So methodologically, we can do it at the district level if there are sufficient resources from Oxfam and from other possible donors. And I think that in order to have a more comprehensive pictures on budget transparency in Vietnam, now we've got POBI, we've got Open Budget Index, OBI, at the national level. We have MOBI for central governments. We have POBI for provinces. But we are missing a measure of public openness or publicity at the district and commune level. So I think that there is a high necessity for such a district and commune level measure. Mr. Thương, I have another question for you about your findings and suggestions in this research. We see that the number of days requiring for publication at the headquarters is 30 days. Is it too short? Because I think that businesses or people may not have the time within these 30 days to have access to information. So 30 days may be too short. And it may be the element to explain why there is still a very modest percentage of people knowing or having access to this information. So what recommendation do you have about the timeline for disclosure so that we can promote for a better practice in budget disclosure? How long should it be? Yeah, thank you, Ms. Huyền. I think that Mr. Long already mentioned in his presentation, well, 30 days is the minimum under Circular 343 on commune budget publicity. Is it sufficient or not? I mean, the availability of a budget document according to international budget partnership, a good practice would be that access to budget information is available and affordable. So if we disclose for 30 days and then there may be a reason why the information is not disclosed further, maybe because it has been there for long, then there should be other ways to make it available. For example, on the electronic portal of the owners of information of the communes committee, if they have this e-portal, or district committee in their e-portal. And regarding availability, I mean not just availability, but then the user friendliness, the design and the format of this information also needs to be in such a way as to make it easiest for citizens to read and to understand the budget information, to use it to participate in the budget management process at the local levels. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Thương. Yeah. So our confusion, our concern is how to help people to participate more actively in the budget processes. And I will leave that question open for our discussion. And next, I'd like to address Mr. Vũ Sĩ Cường. As a public finance expert, you've been working in this area for quite a long time and delivering teaching and lecturing in this area, not only for your students, but also for government officers. What do you think about the possible actions to reduce the gap between theory and practices in disclosing state budget information and encouraging people's participation in the budget processes, from budget planning to accountability for budget reports? What do you think research team can do and should do to help Vietnam improve budget transparency going forward? Thank you, Ms. Huyền. Yes, as Mr. Thành said, when we design POBI, in any country, and also in Ho Chi Minh's declarations of independence, quoting the U.S. declarations of independence, the nature of the government is for the people and by the people. So we ask ourselves a question. We wanted to promote PCI. What is the ultimate outcome? That's why when we work on the budget transparency index and conduct assessment, we said that we'll try to see how to connect it with PCI. Do improvements in PCI bring about benefits to citizens? Budget transparency is only one part of it, because they would know that, okay, my competitiveness is better. Can I receive better budget transfers, or can I have a better budget? Can we have a better budget expenditure? Of course, not everyone understands budget in such a complex way. But I think that by disclosing budget information, at least those who are interested and who want to know will have a place to search and to find out about it. For example, growth data or competitive data. Do all these bring about benefits to citizens? So if it helps growth, but if it doesn't result in better budget, then do we really satisfy the need for, governments for the people, by the people? In Vietnam, state budget is managed by inputs. We spend whatever we have. So in order to assess whether a budget has improved quality of education or healthcare, we can't tell, because two things are totally different. The inputs and the outputs part are totally different. So even though the law on state budget has a provision that we will need to work towards result-based or outcome-based budgeting, it is still far from reality. When I was in Canada, we had an internship looking into budget transparency, and there the governments have the result-based budget. So people can ask questions immediately that this year it snowed more heavily than previous years, but then they could see immediately if the budget expenditure for snow clearance was higher than previous years. But in Vietnam, we cannot connect the two sides of the spectrum here, the input and the output part of budgets. If we could, then budget transparency would be much more meaningful. But for developing countries, I think that this is very important as an opportunity for people to understand what money is being spent for, and in what areas. I see one limitation in the indices, that is capital expenditure. Because for recurrent expenditure, as we are input-based budgeting, there are cost norms for everything already. So you can't change. It's very easy to see, right? But you can't change because it needs to be based on cost norms. Yeah. School, for example, for Hanoi, we need to have the capital expenditure invested first before we can allocate recurrent expenditure. However, the information on capital expenditure in our budgets is very limited. So, transparency or publicity of capital expenditure is highly limited in the entire picture. The disclosure for the recurrent expenditure part would not be that meaningful because everything is fixed based on the cost norms already. So people don't really need to know that. So I think that the part of the budget information that we want to promote more transparency of and to promote the interactions between citizens and governments is the capital expenditure part rather than recurrent expenditure. You also asked me how to further strengthen budget transparency processes. And I think that in order to engage citizens more effectively and efficiently, we develop the citizens report system, and the role of mass organizations, social organizations would be very important. And I think that currently only the Vietnam Fatherland Fund has played some role. But other organizations such as Farmers Association, or Women's Union, or others are not really highly engaged in the budget processes. You know, our population is 100 million, so it would be very hard to, request or to advocate for individual citizens to be engaged. At least they have to work through their representative organizations. And then their representatives who are elected members of people's councils at different levels, their role in monitoring and overseeing budget transparency should be very important and should be emphasized. We have not conducted such a survey or research, but if found necessary, I think that we can conduct a more in-depth survey of elective members of people's councils at all levels. We can ask elected members of people's councils on their own accountabilities and responsibilities for budget transparency. We will see their awareness, their perception of their roles. So if any other research suggestions are looked for, then I think that a further research could be conducted for elected members of people's councils. One more thing. Accountability is a very important element of transparency, and as Long said, if we only measure transparency itself, then if every province does it, it's okay. They will reach the threshold with the directions of, provincial governments like Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu or other provinces. They will hit the threshold, and for more poorer performers, they have not reached the level of satisfaction here is only because of the lack of support or determination of the local governments. If they do want to make it happen, it's easy. But accountability will require more than that. That's why I think that developing of the indices, we need to focus on accountability even more than just transparency per se, because it will help us go further. If we only measure transparency indicators, administrative indicators in Vietnam are fairly good given its development levels. Why am I saying so? Because in Canada or in France, for example, their administrative system, France is worse than in Vietnam. Very bad, I can say. Like it would take us months to make an appointment. And then, just to make appointments, and we had to bring our papers to the district offices, to have a meeting. So even in advanced countries, in France, it is very bad. However, in Canada, it's totally different. Why? Why the system is in France is so bad, and why can it be good in Canada? You know, in France, in certain provinces, they purposely do so in order to prevent immigrants from coming. That's why they put all sorts of barriers on the administrative procedures. Yeah. And political aspect can partially explain for that. However, in Canada, the administrative system and procedure is very good. And so in Vietnam, we don't have any issue with immigrants. We don't need to put any technical barriers to do well, right? So for countries like Vietnam, we can do well if we can strengthen accountability. And in Canada, accountability is really very high, because whenever citizens have any questions or queries, the administrative office would provide a response immediately. Like students, you know, just need to send a question to the district office that it is snowing heavily in this area, and why the utilities have not intervened with salt to reduce the accidents possibilities, then they would respond immediately. So, I mean, accountability needs to be seen as the more important element of this equation. With the support of UNDP and other donors, we now see better environment now with budget transparency. And I think that it's time for us to make a step further. Not just talking about transparency, but emphasizing more on accountability. Because once we can ask for accountability, for sure, we'll see better transparency. So things have changed, and we are now in 2023, and I believe that we can do much better. And these indicators are very important. These indices are very meaningful. And as Mr. Tang said, it explains why we need to further this work into the future. Thank you. I think that what you have already responds to the questions that we received. We still have like 45 people still listening online. So in the next 20-30 minutes, we hope to use the time to hear more from the audience. So to start with an online question, I would like to ask Mr. Lin to respond by showing on the screen lottery. Question comes from Tung. Lottery plays an important part in the revenues of provincial budgets, and it is understood to be used to spend on education and healthcare. So my question is, how publicly and openly is information on lottery revenues and expenditure be? And can an average high school student, an average citizen can understand this information? Mr. Linh from Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, can you share with us your practices in managing and disclosing budget information with regard to lottery revenues and expenditure? Mr. Linh, please. Yeah. So responding to Mr. Tung's question on revenues from lottery, the planning estimates, finalizing accounts, and disclosing and accountability for transparency of these revenues and expenditure of lottery. For revenue planning, lottery is one of the 3 sources of revenues off budget. So these revenues are entirely used by the local governments on training, on education and healthcare. So it is not accounted for in the budgeting plan. For example, currently the ratio of revenues here is 52-48% for the parts of revenues kept at the province and sent to the central budget. So lottery revenues are not accounted for in these estimates. And the Ministry of Finance also guided that the revenues from lottery should be used for education and healthcare, and school textbooks program. And if there is still a surplus or unused resources, then the provincial governments can spend on other tasks. So the priorities would be for the healthcare and education. In Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, the lottery revenues are estimated at around 1.5 trillion Vietnam dong. And the total budget at Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu provincial level is 42 trillion. So lottery revenues is not a high percentage. And when we prepare our budget, lottery revenues are decentralized. I mean, the province can enjoy 100%, and we will transfer to districts to invest in healthcare and education facilities or infrastructures by decentralization rules. So tertiary schools, vocational training institutions are for districts, while lower secondary schools and kindergartens are managed by the districts. So there are criteria for allocation of these revenues to respective levels of governments for spending this money. So this is how decentralization of revenues and expenditure are regulated. For disclosure of this information, Circular 343 also provides for capital expenditure templates. So in our budget planning, we already display or include in the capital expenditure templates, and also disclose, publicize on our websites. And when the final accounts are prepared, the departments of finance at the district, at the provincial and district level will check whether these funds have been used to the right purpose. And after the monitoring, I mean, when citizens monitor and oversee these activities, it is through a representative mechanism, through the commissions of the People's Councils and the National Assembly's divisions at the provincial and district levels. So the oversight is done through the representative mechanism, and these representative bodies would check and verify whether these lottery revenues have been used to the right purpose and effectively and efficiently. And in late 2021, we also conducted a review of these practices. So this is a practices in Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu. Thank you very much, Mr. Lin. Now I want to give the floor to those who are sitting in the room. Yeah, do you have any comments to make or questions? Good morning. I'm Cương from CIEM, the Central Institute for Economic Management, and I highly appreciate this research. I think that the findings of this research will pave the way for us to conduct further thematic and in-depth research. And I encourage readers to read the research more carefully. I have several observations. First, the time of conducting the research. I understand that you conducted this research this year, and it is both a convenient time but also a challenging time because the pressure of public investments and it is related to many other aspects such as transparency. So this is an advantage of the timing of conducting this research. And also, this is a year when we prepare to conduct reviews of the performance of the strategy on digital transformation and Revolution 4.0, which gives another advantage to this research. Because, in the provinces that have better infrastructures to implement the strategies, they will be found in a better position to perform. The third advantage is that this is the mid-year of a term of the government office. So everything should have been fairly in good shape. However, I do understand that it is also a very challenging time because in May, when you paid your visits, it is also the time when governments had to receive audits team and inspection teams, so they may put their priorities on other things rather than this one. I've been to Bình Dương, Cần Thơ, and Đồng Nai, and I understand the situation at the provincial level. Recently, there is an issue of education and dissemination information in relation to state secrets. So which to be disclosed and which cannot be disclosed? That is one question being debated. So I think that there are disadvantages beside the advantages that you could enjoy for this research. When we talk about good practices in budget transparency, when you talk about local budgets, it is provincial, district, and commune budgets. We also see that in almost all provinces, implementation at the provincial level is much better than the lower level of governments because it depends on the level of development, it depends on the level of resources that they have, and also the political will. So if you can do it better, then I would recommend that in reviewing legal documents, you could try to see more clearly the gaps and the conflicts between different legal documents, and also if there are confusions and discrepancies in understanding and interpreting those documents, which could result in different performance. Second, in each locality, while we have the circulars from the Ministry of Finance, which provide for detailed level, at the local level, usually we would only have regulations on what elements of information to be disclosed. So I don't know whether local governments at the provincial, district, and commune levels have issued those regulations. If they have, then it is a step forward in improving budget transparency. And I see that we have different steps in conducting the research, and you usually go from provincial, district, and then commune level. And I agree, because this is an usual priority. But then I think that you can be more specific and customized in developing the questionnaire for the district, because districts can be different. And then in the questionnaire, in your research, you can try to find a way to compare, to be able to compare across districts. There is a questionnaire for citizens. And then if we can break down by groups, by age groups or sex groups, for example, then we would be in a better position to understand the real needs of different groups. Because, in one budget line, there can be many things. Yeah. If we ask them specific questions, they can know about it. Fourthly, different ways of publicity are being used. So if you can make any suggestions on the ways or forms of publicity at different levels for different groups, then it would be very helpful. And also for timing, is budgeting time is the appropriate time for disclosure or account finalizing, and also for how long, 30 days or longer. I think that 30 days can be adequate if people are interested. If people are interested, and then 30 days would be enough. But if they don't, then posting it more for longer time would not be needed. And when selecting these two provinces, I can see that there is a significant discrepancy. If you choose Hanoi, Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu and Hải Phòng, for example, then they are comparable. But, or if you chose Điện Biên and Sóc Trăng in the south, then they are more comparable. But then, there are big gaps when you compare Điện Biên with Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu, because of the level of contributions, different levels of budgetary autonomy, one with a surplus, one with deficit. So the mentality, the attitudes, and the culture would be different, of course. And when selecting the two provinces, I think that we need to pay more attention to the relevant criteria to make comparisons, and then later on for you to make recommendations. For example, 3 provinces in the north, 3 provinces in the center, and 3 provinces in the south. Then we would know, and they are more comparable. given their level of development, given their level of budget autonomy, and their perception and awareness about responsibility and accountability. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing your views, and I think that the team can also respond to these observations. Long, do you have any response to make? Okay, Thành. Yeah, thank you. I have to thank Mr. Cương for your comments. Yeah, very sharp comments. Very useful technical comments for us, and combined with the views shared by Mr. Cương. So we learned a lot, and we took notes of your views. Besides technical, thematic discussions and seminars on this topic, the comments from experts are highly valuable to us, and you are quite right, Mr. Cương, because you are very experienced in this type of research. And from our side, we recognize one thing: this is just a preliminary research, trying to surface out the issues to be explored further. So while the provinces may be totally different and very different, they may share certain similarities in terms of gradual improvements of their performance. But of course, there are many other elements to look at. And if we have time, if we have resources to do this research in 9 provinces of 3 regions, that would be ideal. For sure, we'll be able to see many more interesting things from the research. Now, I want to combine one point mentioned by Mr. Cương about accountability, and Mr. Cương comment about good practices at the local levels. I agree that we are still a long way from talking about accountability and having accountability, because our structures rely on representative establishments such as Fatherland Front or others. But if the representative bodies rely on budgetary funds, then their vocal level or their independence and vocality would be undermined in comparison with more external independent groups, which do not have to rely on the state budgets to be vocal and to be frank and straightforward. So I think that transparency is the first step. Yeah, and we need to make step by step. The first one is transparency, and accountability is the next. And we are moving towards it. Because if you are not transparent, you are problematic morally and in terms of duties, responsibility. And then we talk about accountability. So there need to be changes in the citizens' engagement and interactions with governments. And to that end, we need to lay solid blocks, foundations, which is transparency. And this is what we are doing. Thank you. Final chance for final questions from online, but allow me to paraphrase this question because we also ask for international practices, but I want to look at Vietnamese good practices, which would be much more easily replicable for Vietnam rather than other international practices, because internationally, Canada is different from France and France is different from Vietnam. That's why I want to reframe your questions to focus on good practices right here in our country. Hopefully that by sometimes we can replicate the good practices even down to the commune and village level. So if the good practices can be established here, right here in Vietnam, that would be much more helpful than, learning from an alien country. So, Mr. Thương, Mr. Thành, the citizens' reports that are being implemented in several provinces, where is this practice being exercised, and how are they performing? Thank you, Ms. Huyên. For citizens' report, Ministry of Finance have already provided the templates for these reports and also publicized the citizens' reports on the MOF's website for 2018-2019. For 2021, the oversight has been conducted for more than 20 provinces and already been publicized. Bà Rịa Vũng Tàu is one of the regular provinces that publicizes these citizens' reports, budget report. Đà Nẵng is also another province. Yeah, thank you very much. And it's time for us to close our discussion here. And before closing, I just want to invite Dr. Thành to share with us closing remarks. Well, it's 11:36. Thank you, Ms. Huyên, for moderating this session in a very professional manner. Now we can close our discussion on good practices in local budget transparency and policy implications. The findings of the research, as you can see, about good practices in budget transparency is that they are in line with the laws and regulations in Vietnam in state budget, and also in line with the law on grassroots democracy implementation, while differences remain across the provinces. Second, the contributions of the organizations not in the public sector, PAPI, we recognize these contributions. We've got PAPI by UNDP, POBI by BTAP. So these indices have played active and positive role to encourage provinces, provincial governments to perform better in public budget transparency. In the meantime, we also recognize that there needs to be a stronger level of interactions at the provincial level, at the local levels, on both responsibilities and accountability, and a need to promote transparency culture in public service and public finance, because we have observed differences in practices of different provinces, explained by differences in demographic features, geographical locations, level of developments, and level of contributions to the state budget. So this is what we can see in this big picture, which can be accentuated by further research in order to understand better the nature of the issues, and also for us to be more meaningful and supportive in promoting good governance at local levels. So alongside with improving legal framework and regulations, regulatory framework at both central and local levels, we will work further towards promoting transparency and publicity we will make another further step on promoting accountability. Once again, I would like to thank all participants to this thematic discussion for your contribution, which have made our event a success. Thank you all for all participants who are present in this room and who are part of the discussion virtually. I'd like to thank the organizers, UNDP, BTAP, and sponsors who have provided financial support to the organization of the research and organization of this event today. Thank you very much, and we can close here. Thank you all, the technical team and the interpreter. Thank you very much.